Queensland has over 3 million hectares of state forest, supplying timber to about 75 sawmills. The biggest threat to this precious resource is wildfires. To help protect Queensland forest from wildfire, about 130 fire towers, cabins and lookouts were built up until the late 80s.
Economically, they were very important for the production of timber and preserving and protecting them from fire, obviously. The main thing they did was to allow people to get to a fire before it got too large.
The bad fire season of '57 was a catalyst for boosting fire detection and firefighting efforts, and the '60s heralded the era of the big towers. Around this time, future master tower builder Arthur Lees joined the Department of Forestry.
Their dad was doing building around the Kenilworth area, and he started working in the forestry, and Sonny Brady was a tower carpenter working there at the time, and he needed an offsider, and Dad started working with him.
Yeah, Clive Price was the forester at Imbil, and he decided that I could do it. I didn't know whether I could or not.
Arthur's big break came when he built the Wagi Tower at Barracuda near Chinchilla in 1964. He went on to build 28 fire towers between 1957 and 1991. In years to come, Arthur's son Gary would join him.
I was 15, and the chap in charge of the fire protection said to Dad he needed to get a offsider to be with him all the time, and I started on the 24th of February 1970.
Building a tower was certainly not an overnight job.
I always poured the cement, and then I had to go on to other tower jobs and come back. And I wasn't fully on the one job all the time, but I'd say it was about 7 months, 8 months on the ground.
Building towers in the middle of the forest in the 60s and 70s was no easy feat, even for a master builder.
With a lot of difficulty.
Yeah, pretty well everything was hand built at the beginning, and the foundations would be poured first, and probably 3 to 6 months later. Everything else would be cut out and assembled on the ground, then disassembled and stood up. There's no cranes or anything like that on site, and no power, no water, no phones. For the three-legged, you'd stand a single pole up and then brace it off, and then there's three big pulley blocks and a very heavy wire rope would hook between that single pole and the 2 poles. That'd be together, and that hooked onto a dozer, and on the signal from Dad, he would just slowly walk away.
Selecting and transporting the poles presented its own range of challenges, but nothing the master builder couldn't overcome.
The poles, they'd be the hardest thing to get on site. They were sent on the train to go out to the area and then transported from the train to site.
Over the years, fire lookouts took numerous forms, including big trees with a ladder attached to the trunk, to on-ground cabins and large wooden and steel towers. When told that the big towers were getting too expensive to build, Arthur came up with a simple but ingenious idea.
Cost was the biggest problem. I thought, well, why not put 3-leg and put ladders right around outside. He carried on and did it, and it was very successful.
It's believed that Arthur's 3-legged towers were the only ones of their type in the world.
The tower I'd probably be most proud of would be Jinnah. It'd be the tallest one of its type.
Arthur's crew was essential to a successful build.
I know a bit about that bloke.
Yeah, that's you, yeah.
And he was a forester.
Oh, yeah.
And that was my offsider, Harry Davis.
Yeah, one thing on the jobs that you made sure is you didn't do anything stupid. You always kept your head about you and
Well, that was
very
one
careful.
thing you had to do. Make sure you was right.
There was no shortage of attention given to the towers, with often elaborate opening ceremonies taking place. And when Arthur retired from tower building in 1986, his years of service were recognised.
Yeah, presented to you at Wildfire Tower in 86 by the Honourable Bill Glassam, in recognition of long service for building fire towers for the forestry.
The fire towers started in the 1st of September. They run through to the end of March. You had to be there 24/7 in the early days, which you camped up there for 5 days of the week, and then there'd be another guy go up for the weekend. You couldn't take a radio up for a start. They did let you take up a small book you could read, but most of the time you just had to walk around and just look for a fire all day.
Locating the fire took a mix of keen observation, familiarity of the landscape, and proficient use of the available tools.
When you're up that high, if it's very dry, as most of the time it is, a vehicle travelling on one of these dirt roads will send up a lot of dust. So you've got to look at that and say, well, that's dust or that's smoke. Every now and then it'll puff up a little bit because there'll be wind there and that'll stir it up. You'll get more smoke, and if it gets into some species of vegetation, they burn with black smoke, and that really shows against cloud and blue sky. So once you've done all of that, then you just check your bearing across the string out to the degree lines around the edge of the cabin, and that gives you your bearing. So you had to be watching every spot sort of virtually as often as you could, because you could easily miss it.
While the days were long, it was never boring.
The blokes at Barracuda would go and go to a corner somewhere of the forestry and just light up a couple of tyres just to see how quick you could pick up the smoke.
I never had that.
Yeah. Just to see if you're still awake. Yeah, the funniest thing I ever seen was at Kandara too. I was looking out to the east, and the army come along with their F-111s, and they were coming up to the tower, and they normally just go straight over, so I was still looking for fires. But one of them just turned around, done a big circle right around the tower, and I just didn't know what to do. Yeah,
Reset the pacemaker.
Yeah.
But times change, and inevitably, technology has taken the place of on-site observation in many locations.
Drones and cameras that can be monitored from Dolby will probably be the way of the future.
Outdoor wooden structures slowly deteriorate, and their working life has ended. An historic preservation program with the Chinchilla Museum Interpretive Centre at its core will ensure the legacy of the fire towers and the people that built them will remain for generations to come.
With the preservation of cabins going into a museum, I'm actually quite happy with that, because the Kundara was the first tower that I worked on, and its cabin now is located at the Chinchilla Museum, I believe.